Minutes until we start. Oh well, okay, that's a really obvious go sign, so we'll fly with that then. Okay, welcome. Lean Misconceptions, the return of the reflective practitioner. Hello, welcome people. We're actually ahead. We're the first conference in history that's actually ahead of schedule. Mr. Vinyl, let him have a seat. Okay, there we go. Vinyl books, Lean Misconceptions, and the return of the reflective practitioner. This is probably the longest talk title I've ever submitted. And how did I come up with it? Well, I think that a mate of mine, he's Australian by the way, he sort of helped me summarize it very, very well. Why do I want to give this talk? Because it's sort of good to know. And the reason is, it's so much harder to correct a misconception than to refute a lie. So when people have the wrong idea, and people do have the wrong idea about lean a lot of times, that's sort of hard to prove because you can't sort of show them the facts. If someone is blatantly lying to them, you can sort of say, well, here's the facts, go figure it out. But misconceptions are harder because we also believe that they're true. And stuff we believe and stuff we take for granted and as true is hard to sort of rewind, and that's sort of why I'm backing away even further. So if you were here for Helen, you have Kanban basics. This is taking it even further back and sort of going, okay, where did all of this stuff come from? And who's the guy talking? So this is everything you need to reach me and know who I am. So I wear a lot of hi-hats. Currently I wear that hi-hat, that's a CTO hat and an architect hat, at a small company called Neppa. I've been a consultant, I've been a trainer, I've been a lot of things. I tweet a bit, and you can call me Tobbe. So that sort of summarizes it. And all of this lean, agile stuff thing, all of these value-based things that Mike were talking about, I found a picture to summarize it for us. So this is a well-known Danish company. In working the brewery, it should be a constant purpose, regardless of immediate gain, to develop the art of making beer to the greatest possible degree of perfection, so that this brewery, as well as its products, may ever stand out as a model of, and through their example, assist in keeping beer brewing in this country at a high and honorable level. Isn't that a very fine purpose? Isn't that a lofty goal? And then I think they sort of hit a scaling ceiling. And by the way, what's actually in that glass is not the thing that's the glass is from. It's actually a Smithwick's, because that's actually drinkable compared to Carlsberg. But somewhere, someone really wanted the right thing, right? There's a lot of very nice values in this. Sort of honor, keep it to the greatest possible degree of perfection. It's a lot about thinking and adapting in place. And this is sort of my subtitle, Reflective Practice, or the Reflective Practitioner. And this is what is the essence of Lean to me. Reflective practice is, while we're doing something, thinking about the process of doing and how it fits in the world. And that's sort of creating that space where we're not only figuring out what to do, but also constantly adapting, listening to the environment, sensing it, keeping it to that highest level of perfection. And of course, since we're at a Kanban conference, you can't get away without having a Deming quote. So you need to put one of those up. And this one, I love this because it sort of captured it. Experience by itself teaches nothing. Without theory, experience has no meaning. Without theory, one has no questions to ask. Hence, without theory, there is no learning. Very simple, right? If we don't have a theory, we can't learn. If we only have experience, it has taught us nothing. We need to learn how to see. And this will be a bit of a recurring theme, learning to see. Or quite succinctly, Lean is about thinking about thinking. That's the only thing you need to remember from this session. It's 3 words. Now let's hammer them in for you. And when we come to Lean, there seems to be this idea that there's some sort of Lean guru out there waiting for us. A sensei, someone who needs to guide us, to sort of enlighten us, to figure it out, to help us not make a big mess out of it. And I think this is completely bollocks. Yes, there's a set of wonderful, wonderful people in here at the conference talking. There's a lot of good people out there that can teach you and help you see what they have seen. They have valuable experience. But more than anything else, you need to start thinking for yourself. The gurus are only there if they can help you. If you let them dictate what's going on, they become monsters. They become something to despise. Be your own guru, or search them out, but don't let them tantalize you. To understand Lean, to understand the misconceptions, we need to understand where it comes from, because everything has a start. And if I put this guy up, what do you say? At least someone would say, "Oh, the devil." There are a few of those people sitting over there. Who is that guy? Taylor. What do we think about Taylor?
Good of his time.
Good of his time. Most people say, "Boo, Taylor, die." Frederick Winslow Taylor, the father of scientific management, actually dragged people to court because they misrepresented scientific management. That's kind of interesting. And some people say that he had, or sort of he's often quoted, and this is sort of to put him in a despicable light, that he likened the people that he studied to drunken oxes. So at his time, the people he was sort of watching, the people that he was sort of doing his studies on, the time studies, they were day laborers. They were piss drunk, essentially. So you work for a day, you go out and you drink it all up, and then you start over the next day trying to find another day of labor. What he realized was that he could help them support themselves and their families better by figuring out how to best utilize their capacity. He actually told them to take rest. He told them to work smarter, not harder. He actually instituted a doctrine of saying that, well, the supervisors need to talk closely to the men and they need to understand the work together. It doesn't sound that horrible, does it? So he started a revolution of scientific management, and for its time, it was a step forward. And he inspired this man. Who's this dapper chap? That's Henry Ford. What do we think about Henry Ford?
Good in his time.
It was good in his time. Yeah, well, that's sort of, it all depends. If you start saying that, then I know for sure that you're a consultant.
You can say something also,
So what's really interesting about Henry Ford is that it's a really mixed bag if you start sort of asking people what they think about him. Yes, Industrial Revolution, yes, the tea Ford, yes. What did they think about people? And this is where people start to stumble, because on the one hand, you sort of have this picture of him putting people to a machine and working the people to the machine, essentially saying, well, either you keep up with the machine or you're out of here. And that's not, of course, that's not respect for people. I can completely get that. But what he did also was that he drastically heightened the wages. He increased wages for those laborers multiple times over, because he was a firm believer that the people doing the work should have the means to buy the product. And that's actually what started a big part of that revolution. Why did cars become such a big thing? He had a few wonky ideas, he had a few good ones, but genuinely, he did improve the life of workers. And here comes the real saint. Who's this guy? This is Taichi Ono, the guy credited with the Toyota production system. And the Toyota production system is the thing they studied and then labeled Lean, essentially. What do we think about him? It was good for his time. He's good for every bloody time. This guy is he's a marvel. But he wasn't very pleasant to be around. So he instituted things like respect for people. That's one of the real big values. He got a lot of inspiration from Ford, actually, and he got a lot of inspiration from supermarkets. That's where he got the ideas for the flow, for the one-piece continuous flow, and all of these things. But genuinely, Toyota is set up to create a better society. That's a purpose, that's a mission. That's even further along than sort of people should be able to actually own these cars. It's actually building a better world and society. And this is why I say Lean is actually about societal good. It's not only about profit. But this is the things we often associate with Lean. When you start talking about Lean, people start talking about Muda. For some reason, since it's all Japanese, we keep using these words. Oh, it's all waste. It's all Muda. The Muda is the thing most people focus on. It's the waste of moving stuff, of keeping inventory, of relearning, of having stocks, of all of these things that sort of, we don't like them. It's just piling up everywhere. The interesting thing about Muda is that Muda isn't the root cause. Attacking Muda directly is usually a really bad idea, because what you do want to attack, your vector of attack, if you want to make things better, if you want to reduce Muda, usually where you want to look is at Mura. And Mura is another sort of waste. It's the waste that comes from overburdened systems. So when we overburden a system, when we overload it, people that have too much to do, they start dropping things. Machinery that has too much to do, it breaks down. An overloaded highway becomes a traffic jam. Overloading people, equipment, and systems causes Muda. So the real source often is Mura, or even worse, Muri. Muri is essentially the unevenness of flow. So if you have big seasonal variations, you want to smooth those out. You want to sort of increase the flow, because then that leads to less overburdening if you can sort of amortize the work over time, and that in itself reduces Muda. So that's sort of how you want to work these bits. You want to sort of, well, yes, I can see that we're piling up inventory, but why are we piling up inventory? Usually because something is overburdened, so we need to have a stock, and that's because we can't accurately forecast. Lean is not about waste reduction. A lot of people do this. They sort of go in, we need a Lean initiative because we need to optimize the headcount. Anyone ever been right-sized? You see, this is sort of, when people do this, and they do it under the Lean banner, it's sort of easy to see why Lean gets a bad rep. Any efficiency gain you gain from any Lean tool, you can't use it to throw people out, because if you do, you create fear. Yes, I know that sort of sounds obvious, but when you do that, people won't, they will stop contributing improvement. You can't ask people to, please improve so I can kick you out. But this is what a lot of companies do. They essentially go, we have an improvement initiative, and then sort of, oh yes, we improved 2 people away. Bye, you 2 people, profit. And then they look at other guys and go, guys, why aren't you improving even more? And everyone says, yeah, I'll improve tomorrow. Thank you very much. So anytime, if these 2 ever come into the same sentence, just sort of go, no, 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 no. Any time we actually create by reducing waste, reinvest it. Promise people that the only thing that can happen if we free up personnel from a certain bit is that we'll move them somewhere else. We'll create better opportunities for them. Always reduce waste for bad jobs, essentially, and substitute them with better ones. And as soon as you start talking about waste, the most common interpretation of waste is anything I don't like. I completely get that. The lean perspective is more of along the lines of anything that doesn't directly contribute value to the customer. And then people go, but there's a lot of things that don't directly contribute value to the customer. I love my backlog. Or other such thing. I don't think that is waste. You don't think so. Oh, that's fine. It's okay to think otherwise, but per definition, you're actually wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to like it. Because actually what we're doing is we need to start thinking about protective waste. How many of you would actually consider your backlog waste? 4 brave people. How much of it? I think that's the most wonderful question, because that shows us, battle scars. Okay, the last 400 items of your backlog, they're probably waste. The first 10 are probably good. I usually go with, well, if I got a backlog that's sort of longer than my planning horizon, that's sort of, if I have more backlog than churn, then it's too long. And everything beyond that point is just waste. If I can't see when that thing will get done, chuck it out. But that backlog and having lunch and all of those chit chats and all of those small meetings and all of those having a cinnamon bun and coffee, we call it fika in Swedish, by the way, those are actually, they might be wasteful because you're not actually working on the thing your customer wants, but they're protective, because if you didn't do that thing, you'd probably incur some even worse waste. If you don't have a backlog, then you end up with, okay, so what am I supposed to be doing now? You lack coordination, and then you introduce that waste instead. So start thinking about all of those things you actually like as protective waste. They're not less wasteful, you still want to get rid of them, but at least you can say that they conserve options, and options are good, and options have value. Another neat lean concept is that of standardized work. Anyone heard about standardized work? Anyone thinks it's a brilliant idea? I think it's the best idea. But this is what most people think. If we write down how people should do stuff, that takes all the freedom away, and we can't act, and I can't innovate, and I can't do a lot of things, and why should someone else dictate how I do my work? Anyone heard this? That's exactly what standardized work isn't. So standardized work, if you listen to the guy, if you actually read the literature, if you actually sort of figure out what it is, this is where the reflective practice comes in. This work standard is owned by the people doing the work. It's simply the people doing the work writing down, this is how we're supposed to do this thing, because this is the best way we currently know. It serves as the basis for improvement. It serves as externalizing what's in your head and saying, this is what I know. This is what I have reflected upon. And the work standard isn't sacred. Actually, it's everything but. If it's not changing every week or two, you're not improving well enough. You're not improving fast enough. You're not giving yourself enough space to think. And that's why it's there, to give you freedom, to liberate you to actually do your best work and think about it and understand how it relates to all the different bits and pieces. That's why I love standardized work, because it's a teaching tool. It's a reflective tool. Lean is just a tool. Really, there's a lot of things that are only tools. Crutches are only tools. But a lot of the lean tools are reminders and fixtures, but they're also permission givers. If you have the standardized work and you say, well, this is how we're doing things, unless we deliberately choose to do otherwise, that's a way to push back. If you have a WIP limit, that's an agreement codified into your way of work. You're codifying thinking, you're codifying agreements, you're creating enabling constraints. You're actually creating policies around all the things that let you worry about other things instead. And it should always be the lightest things. So what you need to do is to learn and promote, over invent and dictate. What I mean by this is that since the work standard is owned by the people doing the work, that can of course lead to different groups figuring out to do stuff in slightly different ways, right? And if you're like me, a tech lead, that makes you a bit worried. Because what if those people and those people come up with wildly different solutions and then someone else needs to maintain both of them? But that's okay. You just need to sit with that. It's a trade-off, but how do you get it to actually move over? And what you don't do, and this is what happens at a lot of companies I see, is that they go, well, we'll standardize how we do Scrum. We have found the perfect board design, and everyone should be using this one. Anyone been in that particular train wreck? I'm sorry for you. I've also been there. I've also done it. No one is without sin, I guess. It sounds like a really brilliant idea to standardize how we do things, but actually the groups finding these things should be promoting them. This is what we found. They should be offering them. And if people don't pick them up, fine. You can always sort of dictate a baseline, but actually have the groups promote and have it spread organically. Avoid big batch change. You can't go into this change initiative saying, we'll do incremental releases. I just have one big batch to sort of preload it with, and this is how you do everything. 5S, or the 5 staplers. So as soon as you say 5S, people go, oh, okay, that's where I place my stapler, and then this is where my tape should go. So 5S is it's one of the most well-known lean tools, and it's probably one of the most misunderstood too, because a lot of the examples are for workspaces, and a lot is actually, this is where you place your stapler. I've actually been at the place where they had their desks, and then they had sort of markings like that, and then it stood stapler. And people were rated on how their desk looked when they left it. So at lunch and at sort of end of day, someone actually went and checked that all the things were in the right place. That was a particularly horrible place, trust me. You don't want to be that place. But the 5 S's, what are they? The first S is Siri, and it means clean the mess. What it says is, the first thing you should do at a workstation or in your environment is to remove all the unnecessary stuff. This is the process equivalent of go clean your room. And why would that be a sensible thing to do? Because it helps the essential bit stands out. We're doing it essentially just to remove everything that's not at this moment necessary for us to do this piece of work. And that helps us focus. It's the first step. And this takes different, depending on your context, it of course looks differently. If you're in a big messy code base, getting rid of all of those things that just tangles it up is one way. If you're in a big delivery organization, you have dependencies going all over the place, detangling those dependencies to see the essential ones, it helps. If your desk looks like mine, like there's been war waged on it, then actually sort of getting everything so you can actually see the proper post-its and not all the chewing gum wrappers is a good thing. Sort of just clean up your mess. I don't know what it is, but you've probably got one. As soon as you've sorted out all your stuff, you can move on. You can go to Satan. This is sort and simplify. This is essentially group all the things that belongs together and remove the rest. Ensure that the workspace helps you and supports a smooth workflow. It prevents sort of the waste and loss of time. It is sort of essentially, if you just pour all your socks and underwear into one big drawer, it can be hard to find anything. If you separate it out in two, you can sort of pick them out. That sort of stuff happens in the workplace too. So you've removed everything unnecessary, you've sorted the rest, and now you just need to say so, shine it. You straighten, you streamline. This is where you start polishing stuff. But this is really how you should think about process improvement. There's really no need to start polishing stuff unless you've decluttered it. Unless you figure out what's actually essential, going further is just doesn't help much. You want to sort of take this really step-by-step approach to it. And then you have Seiketsu, standardize. Each thing in its place, each process has its work standard. This is where it starts getting interesting. And this is, for me, a lot of the conversations that we want. When we start talking about how do we do this thing, that's when the magic happens. That's when we can actually start reflecting. When we sort of, our environment is finally clean enough that we can sit down and have a conversation of sort of, is this how we should be doing it? Without getting distracted by all the other things. Shitsuke. So this is the 5th S. And this is the most important one. It's the self-discipline. And this is sort of where the human aspect of Lean comes in. It's all about self-improvement. It's about sustaining this change, about wanting it, about actually working on yourself, ever bettering yourself. Perform regular audits. Do it because it's right. Train. You need to constantly get feedback on how you're doing, why you're doing it, and it's sort of striving for perfection. So you're an honor for your working class. And this is sort of also, this is a thing that commonly comes up is Heijunka. Heijunka helps with irregularities. So Heijunka, a Heijunka box is essentially a big box where you ship it when it's sort of full, and it has sort of, it has a pre-allotted work items. So you do sort of a few of these, a few of those, and then you ship it. Most Scrum teams reinvent the Heijunka box. The way they do it is that they keep the spread or the mix of stories constant over time. So have you ever thought about that? You have a Scrum team that do Scrum with story points. Must be more than one. Okay, maybe you've been in one. If you have a velocity, let's call it 15. What's the most likely outcome? Is it sort of, or are these two situations similar? If you have 15 one-point stories or one 15-point story, would those be equal? It's 15 points. Experience tells you that sort of the risk profiles are kind of different on those two. And what happens is that most teams, they sort of end up going, well, we'll only accept one 5-point story, a few of this size, and a few of this other size. So you have this distribution of sizes, and then you have a distribution of distributions. And the reason you keep the distribution of distributions similar between sprints is simply to contain the risk. And that's actually a Heijunka box in action. You're not aware of it. Now you have a word for it. Isn't that cool? But that's the thing. When you have words for things, when you have processes for them, you can start talking about them. You can sort of say, actually, what's happening here is quite natural. It's been discovered previously. We can go to the source and see why is it a good idea and what's the trade-off. You must have a no hashtag to be controversial. So I'll just go with NoExperts. And then I'll say, well, that's a bit of a misconception, isn't it? But we have this idea in Lean. You often hear about cross-skilling. You should have no handoffs. You should have one piece continuous flow. And it's really easy to go, well, everyone should be a generalist. What happens is if everyone is a generalist? They're not very good. Well, it can be good generalists.
How general?
Hmm?
How general?
How general? Yeah, that's a really good one. Does everyone do everything from sales to implementation?
Yeah.
I have a lot of IT systems. I have 200 different technologies. How full is a full stack developer? That's sort of, if you generalize enough, you can't get anything done. There's a reason we started specializing, and that's simply because there's not enough hours in the day. Cross-skilling is really good. Generalists are really good. Your experts are equally valuable. One really interesting thing you can think about, I have a lot of good friends that are coaches. So this might sound harsh against them, but sort of keep your hats on. One really interesting thing is that who's the strongest proponents about everyone else losing their job titles and being just part of the team? The guy with the job title that says sort of consultant or agile coach. And he's very special because he won't be part of the team. Wait, what now? Everyone should be equal except me. Someone wrote a book about that. Experts are useful. Multiskilling is useful. It's a trade-off. You need to find what works for you. And you need to find out that, and that's actually handling the flow, handling the overburdening, handling the dependencies. So there's no right or wrong, but NoExperts is just a lot of stuff actually gets lost in transformation. If you've ever been part of a big waterfallish organization, was it actually that bad all the time? Some people are smiling, some are nodding.
Sometimes it was funny.
Sometimes it was funny. I was actually part of a quite big transformation. We went all lean and agile. It was so awesome because we squeezed out all the waste. But we actually lost a lot of things. Because if you have a system that's bad enough, you'll get unintentional pockets of goodness. So if you've ever been in a consultancy, or if you've been in a big waterfallish organization where you have these massive projects, planning Gantt charts, and then on occasion it happens that, well, there's no project starting up, but the project you're in is ramping down, so you get put on the bench. Anyone been on the bench? Am I the only one that actually got put on the bench? So you get put on the bench, and what happens when you're on the bench is that all of a sudden you have multiple weeks to sort of go, oh, I'll go sharpen my saw. I'll take a course. I'll fiddle with this open source project thingamajiggy. And you get tons of innovation. The organization is standing there going, oh man, we're wasting so much time. And people are actually feeling that this is inefficient. But we're actually getting a lot of innovation. What actually happens when you take all of this away and you get a much more fluid model, all of a sudden people are running all the time. You have no downtime. You don't engineer the slack back in. And this is actually one of the things that makes lean transformation really, really, really hard. Because the simple broken system you're transforming from has good things baked in that if you remove the big constraints, the big batches, you also remove these pockets that sort of create spontaneity. You also create sort of, you also miss out on long-standing teams often. I've seen a lot of agile initiatives sort of go, ooh, we're working in 1 week iterations. Everyone's an expert, or no one's an expert. Let's just move people around as they're needed. And the team never gets to gel. So that lean thing. How was it now again? So lean. The next time you hear it, remember that this is the correct spelling. It's all about the learn. The R is silent, but that's the correct spelling of it, okay? And also, when people start talking about variance and variability, realize that in manufacturing, reducing variance is really, really neat because it gives you very predictable outcomes. In knowledge work and almost everywhere else, you want to manage it instead. I think it's Don Ryerson that usually go, if you have a horse race, and on average, the horses are equally fast, it's the one with the biggest variance that will win the most races. Which is actually mathematically true. And I want you to be a very special kind of horse. Because I want you to imagine wonderful. And I want you to actually figure out what lean means to you and sort of not see it as a rigorous toolbox, but an invitation to think about work and what work could be in a completely new way. It's a lens, so go out and learn. and do engage. That's how you reach me. Thank you for your time. And we should have a few minutes.
I suppose the one thing you didn't really say is, or didn't touch on, I'm assuming that it's just a given, is that people want to do this. Because if they don't want to do it, it doesn't matter how good it is, and it doesn't matter how much of anything it is, they just don't want to do it.
If people don't want to do it, it won't work.
Yeah.
Yep. and that's also, that's one of those really hard sells. I actually got that question just last week in a debate. Sort of people went, so where do you start? And I'm like, well, there's a few simple rules. You got a shovel, so start digging. It always starts with you. And if you want someone else to jump on your lean train, the one thing you're not allowed to do is hit them with your lean shovel. You can inspire them, that's fine, you can talk about it, you can sort of share the stories of all the fun you're having, but you can't go and hit people with it because, and then that's where, when all of these tools become a problem, is when you try to subject someone else to them. When you sort of go, you put your stapler over there, I've written your work standard, please be engaged. People do that. And then they come to these gatherings and sort of go, Tobbe, can you tell me? I got a problem. How do you motivate people? Stop hitting them for once. So yes, it starts with you, but you can also reach your execs that way. Sort of. They have a problem. Take the 3 biggest problems on their desk and go solve them. They won't care if it's agile, if it's lean, or if it's whatever, because, removing pain, everyone understands that. Anything more? Otherwise it's coffee.
Yes, coffee.
And there's green cards over here. You can give the red ones to me. And they can come up and get one if they want one.
Somebody at the door.